All right, Robert's rules. By show of chat, how many of you have sat in a 3.5 hour meeting that probably could have been an email? Give me a show of chat. We're gonna have some interaction today. I see hands raising. All right, beautiful. Yeah, all right. Well, if you're a member of JCI, that might have happened at least once. If you're not a member of JCI, well, these are pretty common factors. And I'll tell you right now, I do a lot of work with nonprofits, boards of directors, government boards of directors, and it's not necessarily just JCI that experiences this. It is all over. And part of that is because people don't necessarily look at what the importance of a meeting is or what the value of a meeting is. And oftentimes we get a little lax and we don't necessarily use the tools that we've been given. So today is going to be a primer on this. I want to encourage you to ask questions. I do have it structured logically, so hopefully we can get through it. And I do have one question just so I can get to know my audience a little bit better. How many of you are Marvel Universe superhero fans or at least aware of them? Okay, good. If you're not, it's not going to hurt you, but I like to have a little fun with these types of things, so you'll get to see what that means in just a little bit. If you didn't know this already about me, I am a gigantic nerd. I love Robert's Rules of Order, plus Marvel, plus behavioral science and all that fun stuff. But let's kick this off right and start with why. Why is something like a rule structure? Why do you think a rule structure or a system like Robert's Rules is important for a meeting? Let's fire that off in the chat. Let's see what you got. And let's find out what you think. Why do we use something like Robert's Rules or a meeting structure? Yeah, exactly. For structure, to prevent chaos. Yes, Jonathan, absolutely. Organization, consistency. I love that, Kiki. For all parties to be heard, absolutely. Yes, efficiency, protocol, to avoid long tangents, democracy, saving time. Love it. Nailed the answers, right? So we need to get a firm understanding of why are we using this before we start trying to really understand how to use them. And the reason for that is because when you have a new member or if you're on a new board of directors and they don't understand the purpose, that's what allows us to get informal. And then all of a sudden, all of the bad habits of meetings start to come out. So helping your boards, your teams to understand the purpose of Robert's Rules is one of the best things you can do. Here are the 5 main reasons that I'll start with. Number 1, order and maintaining focus, because none of us want to be there for 5-hour meetings. And yes, I have sat through a 5-hour meeting where I literally wanted to bang my head against the wall just to see if something interesting would come out of it. Professionalism and decorum. If you've been in a meeting where people are arguing or fighting or going back and forth, or even a meeting where 2 people completely take over the meeting and just argue back and forth with each other while everyone else sits completely bored, Robert's Rules is for you. Fairness. If you've ever felt like your voice has been taken away, if you ever feel like you have something to say, but you're not exactly sure how to get in there, or if you see that some people in your organization have something to say, but they're being kind of silenced or pushed to the side, that's why Robert's Rules is critical for democracy and making sure that those voices are heard. For civility. This is really important. We live in a world at this point in time where communication has gotten progressively less and less civil. People argue, they fight, they sometimes, use language that they probably shouldn't inside of meetings. And we see this whether it's at the highest forms of government or even inside of a business meeting or a nonprofit meeting, non-governmental meeting. So those are our reasons. Now, I'm going to give you one more, and this is a tool that you can use, whether it's in JCI or in business. This is called the hidden costs of meetings. This is a calculator, okay? So I'm going to give you a quick for instance. Let me click on this so we have it up. Everybody can see the calculator. Give me a quick nod if you do. All right, perfect. Use this tool. It will literally nauseate you. So let me just go down and say, all right, the tool is JCI Congress. Oh, I'll try not to misspell it. We're going to say that our Congress, we're going to be really nice. Our Congress meeting lasts 3 hours. We know there's at least 50 participants from around the world. We're going to just say an average salary of $40,000. So some people have more, some people have less. Look at that cost go up. Oh my gosh, this is getting disgusting, getting disgusting. Oof, $4,200 for 50 people to sit in a room for 3 hours. If that doesn't make you want to have more efficient meetings, I literally do not know what else could. This is a cool tool, whether you're in business or anything else. I have calculated the cost of every one of our team meetings to understand, do we need to figure out a way to shorten this? Do we need to figure out a way to reduce the number of people that are in that meeting space? So I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at this tool. It's going to be shared along with the slides to each and every one of you. So you'll have these links to be able to use afterwards. All right. The second aspect that I want to cover today, and we're going to go back to our slide presentation, is the behaviors of meetings. So most of you know that I'm into behavioral science. We have an entire behavior program. How many of you have taken the behavioral elements program? If you have, throw your primary element into the chat right now. Let's see how many people have done this. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to do this afterwards. All right, so we have waters and a couple of fires. Yeah, I know you, Annika and Trine. It's good to see you, friends. Nora, there's my water. Jan, hello, sir. Giselle, yes, yes, yes. All right, so we've got a lot of people that have taken it, but if you haven't, that's perfectly okay. So for the purposes of today's training, let's just take a look at what each of those individual areas are. Our fire elements are the competitors. They want to be fast. They want to make the decision. They want to get done and quickly. And if you are chit-chatting, we ain't got time for that. So we just push forward. Incidentally, I might be a fire element as my primary element. The air element is in service to learning, and they like to brainstorm. They like to talk. They like to have conversations. They like to explore new ideas. Our earth element is our defense drive. That is much more focused on structure, procedure, logic, analytics. They're the ones that's going to say, bylaw 8.49613 indicates that you will not have this speaking turn. And then our water elements, which is much more of our people, our drive to bond. They are focused on consensus and understanding and empathy and conversations with each other. So you see the link at the bottom. You can take a quick assessment. It's absolutely free. That'll tell you what your primary element is. We're not going to spend too much time here. What do those elements relate to? 4 core biological drives as discovered by Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria, 2 management scientists. We determined how to measure those things, and that's where our elements come from. But what does that mean in the context of a meeting? All right, so in a meeting, if we look at our element wheel, our fire elements can be very assertive. This is the one that's demanding, maybe requires or requests or pushes, can be very focused on the task at hand. They also might get bored very, very quickly. Don't sit there and belabor the point. Oh God, why didn't we just make this decision already? We've been talking about this for 38 seconds. That's something you'd hear come out of the fire's mouth. They also will utilize things like Robert's rules to win. So you might think that the fire who doesn't necessarily, follow all the rules all the time, they will follow the rules and use the rules when it's to their advantage. It's in service to that competition. Our air elements in meetings, much more explorative. So brainstorming, they're going to like debate. They're going to look for multiple ideas and options. They're going to be open to discussions, and discussions can go and go and go. And before you know it, you might have been talking about bylaw changes, and all of a sudden you're talking about polar bear migratory patterns in the Arctic. So that would be very common inside of an air element meeting. I tease a little bit on these, but these are common behavioral traits of each. Our water elements are going to be much more focused on consensus. They're going to be slow to vote because they're going to want to make sure that everybody has had the chance to be heard and heard again and heard again and heard again until literally there might be exhaustion coming from everybody. But they're very considerate of the impact on all of the people in the organization. So it's not just going to be about them, it's going to be about everyone's. They may bring up different ideas or concepts to make sure that all voices are not only heard, but represented. And then last but not least, our earth element's going to be much more methodical in its reactions. They're likely to more follow the rules and the procedures. This means that if you have times on your agenda and you are behind the times, the earth element's internal mechanisms are going to start tightening up and they're going to say, you're off of your timing, and be pushing you to stay on track. But it's going to be in service to that defense, that logic, that structure. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do and use this as a tool is to assess your board. Learn which element your board is. That's going to give you an idea of how to manage them as a chairperson for a meeting. If I know I'm sitting in a room full of fires, I'm going to have to be a little quicker. If I'm in a room full of waters, I'm going to need to make sure that I'm intentionally being more inclusive to reach out and ask their opinions, because they may be reluctant to give their opinion because they don't want to rock a boat. This is something that can be very helpful in understanding your board dynamics, so that way you can be more effective in engaging your entire group. Most groups are going to have a mixture of each of the different elements. That's going to be something where you can learn, okay, I need to give Jay a job or he's going to get bored very, very quickly. I need to make sure that Neil, you're an air, right? Were you an air for me?
No, I'm actually a fair amount of all, but actually earth wins.
Okay, so if I know that Neil is my earth, I need to make sure that Neil is going to be following the orders and the agenda. I need to make sure that we're not stepping out of line. If I know that Nadia,
I would have a fit.
Right? If I know my friend Nadia is a water, well, then I'm going to need to make sure that she is making sure that everybody's taken care of inside of that meeting and that nobody's being left behind, and so on and so forth. So use this as a tool to understand who you're working with, and that will give you a much better meeting. All right, so let's move forward to the principles of procedure. Oh, the exciting stuff. Well, I'm hoping it's exciting. Safa, that's a great question. Can we be a bit of each depending on circumstances and the nature of meetings? Yes. So the quick assessment will tell you what your primary element is. Our full assessment actually measures all of the different elements inside of you. So we as humans have all 4 elements, and it's just varying levels of which one drives us more or which one produces more of our behavior. We all need to actually work to fill all of our different elements. Otherwise, we might not feel fulfilled as well. So great question. Yes, absolutely. Understanding that primary one should give you some good insight, but you can always go deeper with that. All right, the principles behind Parley Pro. There's 3 main principles that I want you to be aware of. 1, majority rules, right? We take a vote, the majority wins. All right, we move on to the next item. The second is minority rights. Minority meaning whoever is on the side of a debate, whoever's on the side of a discussion, that they still have the opportunity to engage and to participate and to have their voices heard. They also have tools to make sure that they're not just being overrun by a majority. So if myself, Christina, Arthur, and Kyle are all on one team, and Rachel and Richard are on the minority side of things, Rachel and Richard still have a lot of ability to be able to make influence inside of a meeting when utilizing something like Robert's Rules. The last but not least, and this is where I'm going to really hammer on things, silence is compliance. What does that mean? If you don't speak up, you are leaving your rights on the table. You are leaving your ability to make influence on the table. You are leaving your leadership on the table. Silence means that you are not engaging. One of the things that I really try to do, especially in JCI boards, but also even in some of the other boards that I serve on, is encourage that everyone speaks at different points and times to make sure that they are at least engaged in the meeting, but have the opportunity to share their ideas. Okay, that is called intentional inclusion. Making sure, because sometimes people don't want to necessarily get out there. Now, you do that in a soft way. You don't say all of a sudden, Marriott, you're up, go ahead, speak. Because if Marriott's not ready to speak, that's going to be very uncomfortable. But I might start the meeting by saying, I'm going to be looking to hear from everyone sitting at this table. I'll take volunteers to start, and then I'll go around to all of the other people in the meeting to make sure that every voice is represented. I'm giving them a heads up in advance. You're going to get called on if you don't volunteer. All right. So that's a good practice. Silence is compliance. Sometimes we might want to be more formal with the rules. Sometimes we can be a little less formal with the rules. That's going to depend on the environment, the group that you're with, and who you're serving. And there's value to both of those. Some of this today that we're going to talk about is the more formalized version. And I'm going to give you scripts and examples so that way you can literally cut names out, paste your name in, and you've got tools to run your meetings effectively, but also to empower the people in your meetings to do this effectively. All right. So before we get into this, I want to ask you, and we're going to crowdsource this thing. What are some of the big challenges that you've had inside of meetings? So an example of that might be somebody who talks too much. That's an example of a challenge that you might have inside of a meeting. Using the chat, let's fire off. What do you got? What are your challenges? People not reading the agenda or the preliminary materials? Absolutely. What else do we have? Off topic. Good. Time management, nobody talking. The leader of the meeting doesn't do the job to steer the meeting. Good. People not being on time. Ouch. Yes. People cutting others, not listening. People not having prepared for the meeting. A lot of time spent on neglecting. Yes. Good. These are all major challenges, and they're not just unique to us sitting here. They are unique to the world, my friends. They are unique to business. They are unique to government. It is everywhere. Derailing conversations. I love that somebody said poor chairmanship. We're going to talk about how to lead meetings because that's one of the most critical things. As a leader and a chairperson of the meeting, you have a lot of authority that oftentimes, especially in the world of JCI, I see completely not utilized. If a meeting gets out of control, I oftentimes very first will look to the chair as the reason that that meeting got out of control. And that can suck. If you're the chair, you're like, oh, how did this happen? Well, we're going to give you the tools today to make sure that you're on point. All right. And I start with that. The chairperson. The chairperson does not own the meeting. If I was to ask you who owns the meeting, tell me, who do you think owns the meeting? Yes, the membership, the participants. Now, that doesn't mean that the chairperson's absolved of responsibility on this, right? The chairperson is responsible for keeping the meeting on track, for running the meeting efficiently and effectively, and they have a lot of tools to do so. You're going to see the language and the opportunities of how they're going to be able to do that during a meeting. But with that being said, you as a member, even the membership has a lot of opportunity and power to also support the chair in keeping the meeting on track. And that's something really important to keep into the back of your mind. All right, so let's start with the first things first, the agenda setting. How many of you have an agenda that is the exact same structure that you have seen for the better part of a decade and you haven't made any changes or done anything with your agenda, it's just always exactly the same thing. Okay, treasurer's report, secretary's report, old business, new business, blah, 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 blah. I'm already bored. As a fire, I'm already bored. Literally, your meeting agenda has bored me to death. All right. When we think about an agenda, we obviously have specific business that needs to be conducted for our organizations. We understand that we do have to file reports, that we do have to make votes, and et cetera. But one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to really take a look at your agenda and ask, why is this meeting necessary? What are we accomplishing with this meeting? And when you start to think about that, you might end up finding that there's places that you can add things like consent agendas. And if you don't know what that is, we'll cover that. You might find some places where instead of actually having reports, that those reports are sent out in advance as a meeting packet, that you don't have to have discussions around all of it. Nothing bugs me more than when I see a treasurer's report saying, we have money. Or when I see a treasurer's report that says, here's the balances in all of the accounts that I'm reading directly from the agenda that I could personally read myself. Thank you. That is not a report. That is reading off of a piece of paper. When we think about an agenda or what goes onto an agenda, we really need to be considering what is the purpose of each of those individual items. When you're looking at different aspects of your meeting agenda, thinking about that purpose is going to be critical. Once you establish your agenda, though, that is your roadmap for order. That is something that you are going to take with you and follow meticulously. How many of you, by show of chat, have time signatures or time stamps on your agenda? So you have each item that is specifically timed. Does anybody use time signatures on their agenda? You know, as soon as I saw that, I was like, I knew who was going to be my first to say yes on there. That's pretty funny. Time signatures on agenda. Okay. That can help to keep a meeting on track. Some people who don't use that, give that a shot. If you do use that, that can be a great way. Now, we start our conversation and all of a sudden the conversation derails. Whose job primarily, if we're going to bring the meeting back, and we know the chairperson can say, okay, we're going to stick to the agenda, we're going to follow the order. Who else, what else can be done in order to make sure that we're following the agenda? Anybody got any ideas? Because I know that there's a lot of the levels of parliamentary procedure here. I know that I have a couple of parliamentarians on here. I know that I have some people that, Robert's rules, what's that? Who's Robert? Is that Robert Downey Jr.? You did say Avengers and Marvel, right? So there's a wide variety. I love a timekeeper or a sergeant at arms. You can appoint one of these in a meeting and say, we are going to have Yata, she's going to be the sergeant at arms.
Venga.
Oh, hello. There we go. So we are going to have somebody become the sergeant at arms or the timekeeper for the meeting that will be giving us 5-minute notices, 3-minute notices, 2-minute notices, 1-minute notices, and even stopping somebody from talking. Now, again, we don't want to necessarily violate rights, but we establish the procedures and the expectations preceding the meeting. Other things that you can do is calling an objection. We'll see how that looks in the language. We're going to give you some structured language for that, or calling for the orders of the day. Calling for the orders of the day is essentially a motion that will encourage the chair to get back on track. So that would be to the chair, I move for the orders of the day. That is the indication for the chair to say, you're correct, Jay. I appreciate what you're saying. We have gotten off track from the agenda. We will move back to the points that are being discussed at hand. Okay, again, a little bit formal. An objection, I'll give you an example of a specific example of that coming up. Who here has ever used something called a consent agenda? Let's see what the crowd has. Anybody know what a consent agenda is or used a consent agenda? Is this a familiar term? Okay, good. All right. When I was serving in government, I was an elected official in my local municipality. Consent agenda was my favorite thing in the entire world. And let me tell you why. Because when we were presented with our board packets that we were to prepare and read in advance, we would be given roughly about a 342-page line item document of all of the warrant list of bills, everything that the township had spent in the last 2 weeks. Can you imagine if you had to individually approve each of those specific items? Now, that could be rolled into a consent agenda. We already spent the money. The money was spent by the treasurer. It followed those specific rules. So now at this point in time, the unanimous consent of the entirety of the board could push that through. If I didn't want something to be pushed through, if I had a specific thing that I didn't necessarily want to have consent, I could request that that piece of legislation or that item be pulled out, and we could then put that onto the regular agenda and have discussion about it. So the consent agenda is designed to say, these are things that virtually everyone will just agree with. Things like potentially setting up your approval of the minutes, approval of the agenda. Those could be consent items. If you have them on a consent agenda, you can vote on the entire package all as one vote. Now, if you need to make addendums to the agenda, or if you need to make amendments or changes, that would be pulled out of the consent and put onto the first item of business. Okay. So if you have questions, if you do have questions, GLC Neil is capturing them. So if I don't cover it before the end of this, we will go back to that. I did leave time to make sure that we can cover some specific questions. Okay. I'm going to address your online timekeeper question in about 2 slides, I think. All right. So bear with me on that one, Letitia. Great question. All right. One of the ways that I watch us as JCI members and a lot of boards of directors make a mistake is that there's not acknowledgement. Okay. What does acknowledgement mean? If you have a meeting where people are arguing back and forth, that means that you're probably not using the acknowledgement function of effective meetings. Acknowledgement function is if I want to speak, I address the chairperson of the meeting. And I might do that by saying to the chair, or Mr. Chairperson, or Madam Chairwoman, or something of that nature. Me as a member am not allowed to speak until I am given the floor. And that is an acknowledgement from the chair that it is now my turn to speak in order or logical order. By enforcing acknowledgement as an expectation in your meetings, it will stop people from just randomly. Rachel and I can't just start arguing with each other because back and forth, back and forth, back and forth doesn't occur without the chair's permission to give you the floor of the meeting. So that is something that I really want to hone in on because that will help reduce the amount of tensions. The other reason that we ask to the chair is that we're not actually arguing with our colleague. It's not a question of Rachel and I arguing with each other. It is a question of the two of us to the chair. My esteemed colleague from Malta has indicated X, Y, and Z. I would like to counter that with this. I'm not arguing with Rachel. I'm more arguing to the chair. So that's that acknowledgement function and the direction of those questions. All right. Making a motion, I move. I move to do something. Move being a verb. So in some cases, the chair might say, I will entertain a motion to do X. In which case, so moved. Otherwise, if there is a piece of an item for business on the agenda, I would say something along the lines of, I move to adopt the new bylaw changes as presented. And then of course that requires a second. That's like 101. That is the 101, 101, 101. What does that look like? Okay, so we're going to test your, not so much test your Avengers knowledge here, but Chairman Fury might open up by saying, we are on to new business item 1. It's the adoption of the Sokovia Accords. I open the floor. To which President Ironman says to the chair, looking for the acknowledgement before a motion is made. The chair acknowledges President Ironman. At that point in time, President Ironman says, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to adopt the Sokovia Accords as presented. The Vice President Black Widow says, Mr. Chairman, I second the motion. The chairman then repeats the motion. There's a motion on the floor to adopt the Sokovia Accords as presented. Is there debate or discussion? That would be a very formal way of us introducing new business or items that would require a vote. Why do we do it in this structure? Because we can repeat it over and over and over again. Get acknowledgement, motion is made, motion is seconded, the chair repeats the motion, and then following the repeating of the motion, debate begins. Let me be very clear. Debate does not occur until a motion is made. Debate does not occur until a motion is made. If there is overlying discussion and a lot of discussion on an item, or it's a brainstorming session, that should be done in committee. If it is we don't know what we want to do and we're just going to have it out with this, that can be done in a committee of the whole. It should not be a line item for business. The line item for business is, am I going to adopt these Sokovia Accords or not? And we're going to talk about how to amend and all of the other pieces that go with this. If it is a large discussion, you should be looking to use some of the tools of pushing it to committee. If there is no debate, do you have to ask 3 times? No, you do not. That is a meeting expectation. I would say look towards best practices. For me, is there debate? Is there debate? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Quick. It is the responsibility of the membership to not be silent if they have something to say. It is the responsibility of the membership to speak up if they have something to say. I'm not going to sit there, is there debate? Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. No, absolutely not. That is going to take your time away. All right, I have some real Avengers fans out there. I know. All right, so if a debate had to be done, how much time is ideal to spend on it? Great question, Stevenson. I think that's really going to depend on a number of things. If you're following formal Robert's Rules of Order, you're going to follow a speaking order. Who speaks first? The person who made the motion generally would have the right to speak first. Let me give you an example of how this goes off the rails. So we had a motion and debate. President Ironman has come in and says, I believe that due to recent events, the accords must be signed. Captain America asks to the chair to get the acknowledgement of the chair, which Fury acknowledges. The esteemed gentleman from Brooklyn. Captain America says, I must respectfully disagree with my dear colleague. The accords would be a violation of liberty. So far, so good. But how many times has the following happened in your meetings? Ah, BS. F you. Language. Order. And then all of a sudden, yeah, welcome to a Jay Johnson training. You knew that was going to happen at some point in time. With that being said, Captain America and Iron Man are now completely bogarting your meeting. And that is not the purpose of the Robert's Rules of Order. What we would be looking for is following speaking turns. Iron Man speaks, Captain America speaks, and then everyone else in your membership speaks before Iron Man or Captain America get to speak again. It doesn't matter if they've got a really good argument. It doesn't matter if they feel like they need to say all of these things or respond or react. That is not the tools that they are given inside of a meeting. From the point that they've spoken, if I'm the chairperson and that starts to occur, I would say, order. Mr. Ironman, Mr. America, I'm sorry, you've spoken. Allow the rest of the membership to please speak. We will come back to you if there is time in this debate to hear your rebuttals. And I would move forward. Okay. Now, to the question of how much debate is appropriate. When all voices have been heard or had the opportunity to speak, it is your prerogative as the chair of whether you let them speak a second time or a third time or a fourth time. If you're allowing Captain America and Iron Man to speak 4 times each, and they're just going back and forth, you have allowed your meeting to get out of control. Say your piece, and then we vote. Say your piece, and then we vote. Speaking time and limitations. You can use tools such as the esteemed gentleman from Brooklyn will have 3 minutes to present his case. The timer starts now. Could we please start the timer? You may also say, we will only allow for 15 minutes of debate to occur on this topic area. As many people can speak in that 15-minute time frame. Now, when you make a ruling such as that, what if you need more time? Yes, you can extend debate. What if you need less time? Yes, you can call the vote. What if somebody wants to speak 6 times? Yes, you can stop them from speaking 6 times. You're the chairperson, you own the rules of the meeting, and there are opportunities to overrule the chair. We'll get to some of those, okay? In Google Meet, there's a function to send 2 people to another meeting room. Same with Zoom. You can say, all right, Iron Man, Captain America, go argue this out. Now, if you're sitting there and you go 3 rounds of debate and you still don't have a good, clear picture, maybe that's something that needs to be moved to committee and to let that debate occur inside of committee, not in your formal meeting. Here is something that you can use in that digital space. I said I would get back to this. This is a digital timer. You can very easily set up times and you can set up limitations and use this as an online tool to be able to keep track of things. All right, so let's move forward with that. Limiting and ending debate. This drives me nuts because I see it used incorrectly, literally constantly. If I call the question, which some people have maybe heard, I move the question, or I move the previous question, or I move to call the question. What I'm literally doing is saying, I would like to end debate and vote on this question. In a 3-hour meeting, usually you hear somebody at some point in time get super frustrated. It's probably a fire that says, I move the question. Why do we do that? Okay, well, this can make sure. Now, the chairperson, this is important. There's 2 things that happen with a call to question. The chairperson has the ability to recognize that motion. If that motion is something, now the chairperson can be overruled on this, okay? But the chairperson can say, we have not heard from the esteemed Kyle as well as Melissa. I would entertain that motion to call the question once they have spoken. You can push it, you can't debate it. The chairperson can make that ruling. If the membership says, no, we don't want to hear from Kyle and Melissa, they can appeal the chair's decision on that question. Okay, so this is getting a little bit complicated, but we'll work through this together. Ending debate or limiting debate. These are rules that essentially reduce the membership's ability to have their voices heard, in which case, calling the question requires a 2/3 majority, not a simple majority. We'll get into what simple and 2/3 and everything else, which means 2/3 of all of the votes would have to agree to end debate. It might look a little something like this. Chairman Fury acknowledges the Red Witch. The Red Witch says, "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the previous question." I call the question. Drax the Destroyer says, "Support," and jumps right in. Chairman Fury says, "It has been moved and seconded that we stop debate and vote on the pending question," which is, and states the motion that's on the floor. At that point in time, a vote is taken. All those in favor of stopping debate and voting now, raise your right hand. Members raise hands. All those opposed, raise your hand. Members raise hands. If the ayes have it, it means there are 2/3 in favor and we will vote immediately. And then you vote on the motion. Voting on to call the question is not voting on the motion. That's why this language is very important. All those in favor of stopping debate and voting now, rather than all those in favor. Because what you're doing is you're telling your membership exactly what they're voting on. If the ayes don't have it, there are not 2/3 in favor and debate will continue. Next speaker, please. Okay. Now, this is an example. Again, this is one of those examples of how these things can go. And I'm looking through, how does a chairperson decide to push to a committee for more brainstorm versus voting and let's see? It's a good question. And I think it's going to be context dependent. If I am a chairperson and I'm looking for and there's an item on the agenda for amended bylaws. And as that discussion starts to go, it's very, very evident to me that there were some things that were not thought about, that there were some major issues or challenges with the amendments. At that point in time, I might entertain a motion to send this back to committee. If it's just that people disagree, yes, no, I don't like it, I do like it, I don't like it, I do like it, take the vote. Let it sort itself out that way. But if I'm in the middle of that discussion and I hear major gaps, major misrepresentations or misinterpretations, I might at that point in time say, it appears that this item may not be ready for consideration by the membership. I would entertain a motion to move this back to the bylaws committee for further consideration. I hope that makes sense. Is there a problem with it? Back to committee. Is it that two people don't like it? Take the vote. That would be my best interpretation for you on that. And again, it's going to be somewhat context dependent. All right. Interruptions. What's the point? What are the points? These are different points that can be made at any point in time. Points of order, points of information, and points of privilege. You can interrupt a speaker in order to make these points. So I could be delivering my best arguments for why we should adopt the Sokovia Accords. And in the middle of me speaking, somebody can say, point of order. So it is an interruptible. I think so. You should be looking at interruptions, point of order, information, and privilege. Are we all? Okay, good deal. So at that point in time, they could interrupt me for one of these points of orders. Each of these serves a little bit of a different function. I'll give you just a quick example of each one of them. A point of order, for example, might look something like this. Captain Marvel gets the approval and acknowledgement from the chair. Point of order. The chair acknowledges Captain Marvel. The motion on the floor is about the Sokovia Accords, and the conversation has drifted into infinitive stones. In which case, the chairperson would make a ruling. Thank you, Captain Marvel. We will limit debate to the question at hand, which is the Sokovia Accords. So a point of order is to bring us back onto what it is. It's to say, point of order, we are now discussing the original motion, but an amendment has been made. The discussion should be limited to the amendment. The chairperson would say, duly noted, we will limit the discussion to the amendment. Now, if the chair does not take that point of order, we'll get into what that looks like in just a little bit, okay? That would be where the chair says, I believe that the Infinity Stones discussion is pertinent to the Sokovia Accords. We will allow this debate to continue. The chair can make that ruling. Again, this is where the chair gets to decide, is it on track? Is it not on track? If it's not on track, let's bring it back to track. If it is on track, or we feel like it is on track, the chairperson essentially acts as your adjudicator to make that decision and allow it to go forward. If the chair doesn't make a decision that the membership likes, again, there is a process for fixing that. Point of information. Thor Odinson says, point of information gets acknowledgement from the chair. Did the Sokovia Accords assume jurisdiction in Asgard? To which the chairperson is now going to answer. If the chairperson doesn't have the answer, the chairperson might look to whoever made the motion or the committee that made the motion in order to answer that question. Chairman Fury says, thank you, Mr. Odinson. The Accords are limited to the laws of Midgard, in which case, now that has been answered and the speaking and the debate can be continued. Okay, so point of information is asking a question that is related to what the business is on the floor. Can a person take several motions in a debate? Yes, a person can make motions all over the place. If you are a member and you are a member that is a part of the voting body, then you have the right to do point of informations, point of orders, points of privilege, motions, amended motions, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's get to point of privilege. This is one that's sometimes used, sometimes not used particularly well. A point of privilege is where somebody has something. Now, there is a general point of privilege and a personal point of privilege. Again, that's getting maybe a little technical, but a general point of privilege, and this was literally done in a meeting. I think it's one of the best examples to the chair, point of privilege. What's that? The boiler is about to explode. Okay, that is a general point of privilege that is going to affect everybody that is in the room. It is time for us to recess and get the hell out of this room. Versus a personal point of privilege, which might be to the chair. Clint Barton says, Chairman Fury, I rise to a point of personal privilege. Chairman Fury, please state your point. I'm finding it difficult to hear the speakers clearly. Would everyone be good enough to lean into their microphone, speak up, and enunciate so that I will know what is being said? Chairman Fury, thank you for bringing this up. Members are requested to speak up loudly and clearly during discussion. Alexis, absolutely, you nailed it. Point of privilege, it is an icebox in this room, and I can't take notes because my hands are shaking so badly. I have heard that, and that is a very, very valid point of privilege. Okay, from the chairperson, they might respond, thank you for bringing that up. We will look to try to get the heating and cooling taken care of inside of this room. Now, if it's going to take more than a few seconds to do so, if I'm the chairperson, I may entertain a motion for a short recess to get the temperature under control. I may take a point of, a request for a recess in order to have the technology fixed. So we're not sitting there in the middle of the meeting where everyone's wasting their time. I would entertain a motion for a short recess so we can handle the technological issues that have been presented. We take that recess, people get to go, they get their break and so on and so forth. And now we work on those pieces. If it's going to be a short fix or a super quick thing, that's not necessarily something that you need a recess, but again, use that as a tool if necessary. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Amendments. We are terrible at making amendments, and I'm going to give you 3 rules. Your amendment should be striking something, your amendment should be inserting something, or your amendment should be striking and inserting something. So if I make the motion to adopt the Sokovia Accords and you don't like that, you vote no. If I make the motion to adopt the Sokovia Accords and you want to adopt a different set of accords, you want to adopt the JCI Accords, I move to strike the Sokovia Accords and insert the JCI Accords in its place. That would be an amendment. If you're not striking language or inserting language, odds are your amendment is probably not on point. What does that look like? Madam Gamora, I move to amend the motion to adopting the Sokovia Accords with the inserted language of to take effect only on the planet Earth. To which the response, I am Groot, which, of course, we all know means second. And Chairman Fury, there is an amendment to insert the language to take effect only on the planet Earth. Debate on this amendment may commence. At this point in time, the only debate is not whether you're going to adopt the Sokovia Accords. It is only going to be about whether or not the Sokovia Accords will only be on the planet Earth. Okay, does that make sense? We're not talking about adoption. It's strictly about whether or not it should be Earth or across the entire universe. I'm going to go back to Kevin's question. Must all points of order privilege information be recognized by the chair? Essentially, what you're doing by making a point is getting the chair's attention to make a ruling on something or to take action on something. You're essentially using your points in order to get the chair to do something or to provide something for you. So yes, I would encourage point of orders directly to the chair. The chair will acknowledge it. If the chair does not acknowledge your point of order, you can always do something differently, and you're about to see what that looks like. Does anybody know, and all right, so now I'm going to test you. What is one issue with this amendment that just got made? What is one thing that could be wrong with this amendment? Anybody want to take a gander? Shoot in the chat. What do you think? So if it's illegal or if it's completely incorrect, yeah, the chair does not have to acknowledge that. Oh, interesting. Ooh, what do you mean? Debate should be on to allow the amendment. You could have a debate on that question where it should happen. What did we learn from Thor Odinson's point of information earlier is that the Sokovia Accords are only for Midgard, which is Earth, for those of you not keeping score at home on the Avengers. Alternatively, in this case, the chairman might say, or a member could object to the amendment on the grounds that the motion, the original motion, only pertains to Earth, and that this would be redundant. An interesting little fix here, okay? Now, if you have a motion that has been made and an amendment is made to it, and that amendment is redundant, it's not on point, it's not necessary, it's not useful, or it's illegal, or it's against your constitution, or whatever the reason is, you can object to that amendment and ask for a ruling from the chair. I object to this amendment. This amendment is redundant. It was identified already that there was that this only applies to Earth, in which case there's no need for this amendment. Chairperson Fury at that point in time might say, the objection is noted, and I agree. This is a redundant amendment. We will continue with discussion and debate on the original motion made and share that information. Or they may say, I disagree. The language that has been presented is a necessary condition to ensure that the Sokovia Accords are very clearly only Earth, I will allow this amendment to continue forward. So an objection can be raised and it can be approved or it could be disapproved. Again, we're getting into some higher level Robert's rules here. Now, what if you don't like the chairperson's ruling? What if he says, all right, this amendment is out of order, we're not going to listen to it? Well, at that point in time, if you don't like the chair's ruling on something as a member, you have the ability to challenge the chairperson's ruling. This would be making an appeal. Okay, so we appeal the decision of the chair. We're now getting into a little bit higher levels. So bear with me if it is something that you have questions on. This is an underutilized tool, oftentimes because the chairperson doesn't necessarily make the rulings in the formal settings or in the informal settings of some of the JCIs. But this is one of the rules that you have the ability to challenge a chair's decision. If the body votes and it's a majority, you don't get to challenge that decision. There's other tools for that that we'll talk about. If it's the chair's decision only. So in this last scenario, Fury said, this amendment doesn't fly. What would an appeal look like? Spider-Man says, I rise to a point of order, state your point. My colleague has proposed moving our headquarters to planet Titan. This motion does not fall within the scope of our Constitution. Chairman Fury, the point is well taken, and this motion will not be taken up. Thanos disagrees. I appeal the chair's decision. I believe that this motion does fall within our scope. Nebula seconds that, and Chairman Fury says, very well. Since the decision of the chair has been appealed, the group will decide. At that point in time, the members would debate it. The chairperson speaks first. All members get to speak once, and the chair may speak again at the end of the debate to sum up the discussion, and a vote is made. This is how the members are in control of the meeting, not the chairperson. The chairperson's job is to run it, is to adjudicate it, is to manage it, but it is the members who own it. That's really, really critical. And again, this is something that's not often used, but it is an option in order to make sure that the minority voices are heard. So if the chair says, I'm not going to hear any more debate anymore on this topic, I move to appeal the decision of the chair, seconded by Eugenio. And at that point in time, the chairperson says, I think we've heard enough of this debate. We don't need to hear any more. But then Teresita gets to speak, and Christina gets to speak, and Dr. Jeremy gets to speak, and we all get to speak. And then the chairperson would get to rebuttal, and then you make your vote. If the vote is the majority, guess what? Debate continues. If the vote is in the minority, the debate stops. Okay, so that is appealing a decision of a chair. All right, in the case the chair would like to participate in the debate, does he have to vacate the chair? Consult your bylaws. Okay, there are some instances in which case the bylaws are very clear that the chairperson oversees the meeting and that they don't vote unless there is a tie. In some cases, the bylaws indicate that the chair is able to speak on an item or an agenda item. In most cases, the chair can debate. In most cases, the chair can vote to break a tie or anything else. Instances that may not necessarily, the chair is often not encouraged, not allowed to make the motion. They're not allowed to institute the motion. So that is why a chair says, I will entertain a motion that says X, Y, Z. The membership would then have to make the motion and second the motion in order to facilitate debate or in order to get to debate. So that's a good question. Now, again, I'm going to encourage you to check your bylaws or to check your structures. In a township setting, and I'm going to give you a for instance on this. In a township setting, there are 7 different board members. The supervisor is the person who oversees the meeting, in which case all 7 members of the township board have the right to vote, have the right to, and have to vote. The supervisor has to vote on every single item. They don't get, even if it's all 6 others agree, they still have to vote. It has to be the 7 votes, okay? This is why I'm saying, check your bylaws, check your constitution, check your ordinances, check whatever that is, because it can be different. In a city government, the chairperson doesn't vote. The chairperson doesn't engage in debate. In some instances, if the chairperson is debating and you as a member find the chairperson to not be unbiased on the question, what is your options? I'm testing you now. So we're going to follow on Annika's, we're going to follow on, let's see, we got to get this muted. There we go. And we're going to follow on Annika's question. The chair is being biased. The chair is engaged in debate and you don't think that they're being objective. We appeal the chair. We appeal the chair's decision. We may even make an objection to say, I object. We want you to facilitate this discussion. We would ask that if you have a strong opinion one way or the other, that you step down from your chairperson's position and engage in a debate. You can make that objection, okay? The chairperson says, no, I'm the chair, na boo boo, you can't do anything about it. That's false. You can actually remove a chair from your meeting. You as the members. I move to remove the chairperson as the chairperson for this motion or line item. It's supported by GLC Neal. We now debate this and we remove the chairperson from that agenda item. You can reinstate that chairperson afterwards if you want to. Again, it is done in formality. Now, you can make the objection first and maybe the chair says, you're right, I'm sorry, this is a passion topic. I would like to recuse myself as the chair for the purposes of this agenda item. I would like to appoint GLC Neal to chair this agenda item while I debate because this is a motion that I'm very passionate about. Okay? You always have options. How we use those or how we effectively use those is really the question. So I hope that answers your question. Check your bylaws of whether or not the chairperson is a breaking the tie vote, is a expected vote. Now, and let me tell you one other thing, right? If the chairperson is the president of my local organization and you are taking minutes, I would like to know how my president voted. I would like to see that vote on every single minutes. Is the president representing my interests, my beliefs, my values, or whatever that they were elected to do? In which case, I find it very, very appropriate for the president who might be chairing the meeting to cast their vote on a question. Should they be objective and unbiased and allow for the rights of the minority? Absolutely. If they're not, objections, removing the chair, making those motions or appeals. Good questions. Now we're getting deep. This is fun. All right. These ones are often screwed up. I'm going to say it right there. Pay attention. 3 different motions impacting 3 different ways in which we try to table a piece of business. Okay. So the motion was made for the Sokovia Accords, and we decide, you know what? Captain America's not in the room right now, and we really think that we would benefit from the discussion from Captain America. I move to table this item to the end of the meeting. Tabling something is taking it off of the current table and making it later in that same meeting. If it is not brought up again in that meeting, it dies. Tabling something is to make it later in that meeting, to not deal with that business. You may also, I move to table this item until we discuss the budget. Okay, that is a good, that's a good postponement type motion. Well, we need to know what the budget is before we approve our marketing expenditures. Great. I move to table this until we've had our budget discussion. It requires a second. The team, the membership votes on that, and then that item becomes item G directly under the budget. A motion to postpone has a definitive end date. I move to postpone the Sokovia Accords motion until August 2022, into our annual meeting of August 2022. I move to postpone this until our next general membership meeting. I move to postpone this to a definitive time and date. That item, if approved, if that motion is approved, that item becomes old business on that next agenda. I can also use a motion to postpone indefinitely. That means I'm killing it. I never want to talk about this again. Burn those images into your brain. A motion to table is later. A motion to postpone is a specific time and date in the future. And a motion to postpone indefinitely, that motion's dead. It's not brought up again in its existing form. You'd have to make amendments to it, changes to it, substantive changes to it in order for that piece to be revisited again. Use these ones correctly. Because if you accidentally postpone something indefinitely and it goes into your minutes, in theory, it's dead. All right. Referring to a committee, we're not getting anywhere. Two different ways to do this. You can refer to an established committee, or you can refer to an ad hoc committee. The difference between those. So say, for example, you already have a finance committee and you're talking about the budget and you realize that there's some big gaps or some big challenges. I move to refer this back to the budget committee for further consideration. It's already established, they already exist, they're already out there. You can push it to that committee. I move to send this to the bylaw committee for further consideration. I move to send this to whatever the committee is in existence. An ad hoc committee is a committee that is then created on site. This is what that would look like. Say we're talking about the Sokovia Accords, and I, as a member, am tired of listening to the debate, and clearly we're not there yet. I move to send this to an ad hoc committee consisting of President Ironman, Captain America, Gamora, Thanos, and Thor. I've identified what that ad hoc committee is. I would need a second when that second is made. Now, if somebody says, I move to amend that motion, I believe that Nebula should be on that committee as well. I move to amend to insert Nebula's name. Insert, remember, insert or strike. I move to amend to strike Thanos from that. Those would be acceptable amendments to the question. An ad hoc committee is one that is formed. If you're making the motion to send this to an ad hoc committee, as a member, I can also say, I move to send this to an ad hoc committee formed by the chair. I can put the onus on the chair to create an ad hoc committee for it if yeah, nice, Jonathan, I like it. If I don't want to be the person that decides who's on that committee, I can say, I move to have this go to an ad hoc committee. The chair will decide the committee members. Or the bylaws committee will decide the members of this ad hoc committee. I move to send this to a committee of 7, decided by the chair. You can be very specific with your ad hoc committee requests. That's going to get you out of some debate inside of your formal meeting. which should be voted on before the main motion. Absolutely. So if I am making a motion to send this to committee, that occurs before we adopt the Sokovia Accords, right? Because I'm saying we're not ready to adopt these. Let's send it to committee for further consideration. So the main motion is set aside and the committee motion is going to be taken up. If there's amendments to the committee motion, adding Gomorrah, or subtracting Gomorrah, adding Nebula, then each of those amendments stack on top of each other. You have to take the Nebula one and get that out of the way. Then you take the Gomorrah one and get that out of the way. Then you vote on the committee and get that out of the way. And if the committee works, it goes to committee. If the committee's voted down, it goes back to the original motion. Every time a motion is made, they stack on top of each other, in which case you have to unbundle them. This is why when you're making amendments, it's insert, strike, or insert and strike. So that way your chairperson, your sergeant at arms, whomever, can put the language specifically on the screen to follow along with each on the screen or on a piece of paper so they can follow the stacked amendments. It's really critical in order for you to make clear what you're actually voting on. That's also why it's very important that the chairperson says, we are voting on the amendment to add Nebula. Is there discussion? If they start talking about Gomorrah, that's out of order. We're focused on Nebula at this point in time because that is the amendment that's on the table. We're not talking about adoption. We're not talking about committee. It's only about adding Nebula to the committee. So you might be in total disagreement with the committee, but supportive to have Nebula on the committee and still vote down the committee, okay? You take them one at a time. All right, cool. Oops, we messed up. We signed the accords and we probably shouldn't have. Well, there's a couple of ways that we can handle that. If I am the person who made the motion and say that we're in discussion and at some point in time you've shown me that there's some really bad language in the Sokovia Accords that I missed, I can personally withdraw my motion. That would be immediate. I withdraw my motion to adopt the Sokovia Accords. Somebody else can still make the motion to adopt it, but I personally am withdrawing it. I am the only person that can withdraw my motion. Reconsideration. Say we're in the Avengers compound and the vote to adopt the Sokovia Accords passes. Okay, motion's passed. Somewhere down the line when they're talking about budgets, they realize, oh my gosh, we passed this and we have no mechanism for enforcement. What are we going to do? I move to reconsider the motion to adopt the Sokovia Accords. Only, this is the key, the people that were on the majority have to make that motion. So if I lost, if I was on the minority and I said, no, don't pass it, and it passes, I can't move to reconsider it because I'm on the minority. Of course, I'm going to ask you to reconsider it. No, reconsider this again and again and again. Nope, it doesn't work like that. Only the majority can make the motion to reconsider. The motion to reconsider is only done in the same meeting. Make sense? If the motion to reconsider passes, that means that you have to vote on the item again. Reconsidering doesn't mean that the item goes away. Again, it's stacking your motions. I move to reconsider, that passes. Now this motion is back on the table, the motion to approve. We can debate it again. We can have arguments on it again. but we still have to take action on that piece of business. Okay, so just because a motion to reconsider passes doesn't mean that the motion goes away. It just means that it's back on the table for discussion and for a vote. A motion to rescind is different. What is a motion to rescind? Say you got to the next meeting. We're going to say the meeting, not the same meeting, the next meeting, and only the next meeting, and only the next meeting. Be very clear. The next meeting, we realized, oops, we made a mistake on those Sokovia Accords. The last 3 weeks, it's been bad. The majority can make a motion to rescind the original motion. So essentially, that kills it. Because that is a original business, you already passed it, it's already in existence. Because you're killing something that the membership has already decided, it requires a 2/3 majority. It's not a simple majority at that point in time. A 2/3 majority in order to be able to go through that. All right, I see a couple of questions. Haley, would the withdrawal of the motion by the person who made it require a seconder? No. And here's the interesting thing, okay? If I make a motion, I am obligated to vote in favor of that motion. If I make the motion and Neil seconds the motion, he is not required to vote in favor of the motion. The seconder or the supporter does not have to vote in favor of the motion that they supported. A second is strictly to make discussion possible. A second or a supported motion is only to make discussion possible. In which case that I am withdrawing my original motion, I don't need a second to do that. If somebody, if Ingeborg decides that she wants to make a motion, somebody would have to second her motion in order for it to continue to have discussion. Okay. 2/3 of all or 2/3 that voted for. 2/3 of the voting members on the floor. So if there's 100 members and 80 people said yes the first time, I still only need essentially 67%. I need 2/3, 67 people to say yes. I don't need all 80 or 2/3 of the 80. I need 67 of the full voting body. Good questions. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you. All right, so the difference between withdraw, reconsider, same meeting, and rescind. Rescinding also requires notice. There has to be notice that a motion to rescind is on there. That gives your membership and your voting body the opportunity to say, hey, we already said yes to this. We need to show up to make sure that our voices are heard, or we need to show up to get rid of this. You have to have notice on a motion to rescind. All right. Yeah, me too, Joanna. That's funny. All right, so a house divided. All right, voting. Oftentimes we do a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. All in favor, please say bylaws. All opposed, please say no bylaws, or whatever it is. That would be a simple voice vote. Sometimes in the electronic media, it's a little harder. Sometimes even in a room, because you might have people go, aye, and they scream it out and you can't really tell. Okay, well, there are some votes, different ways to do that. First of all, a roll call vote. So for example, and we use these things even within our company. There are issues or items that a simple aye, nay might suffice. But as chair of a meeting, I may say, this is a budget adoption. I'm looking for a roll call vote. Mr. Fitzgerald, yes. Mr. Essenberg, yes. Ms. Schmitz, no. Ms. Delphine, no, because I want it recorded how each person has voted on that item. Okay, that would be a roll call vote or a purpose for a roll call vote. You can also do this if you have various levels of voting strength. So say I've got 100 presidents, but not all presidents are created equal because of their membership numbers. I may ask for a roll call vote strictly because I have to tabulate how much voting power each member has inside of a space, and thus a roll call vote would be necessary. White ballot, if I remember correctly, Christina, that is really where it's more of a vote by acclamation. So it's everybody's kind of in agreement, or say that there's a candidate for elected office and there's no opposition candidate. I may move to vote by acclamation, so we don't have to do a roll call vote on that, in which case we say aye and nay, but somebody could still actually ask for a division. Somebody can ask for a division. The chair, now this is an interesting thing, okay? Say that we're in here and we've got, 200 plus people on this, and we say all in favor say aye, and 220 people say aye, and I could hear them all, and 3 people say nay. And I, as the chair, say the ayes have it and we're moving forward. And one of the nays, one of the 2 people out of the 220 says division. Where very clearly there was a massive majority. I, as the chair, can say objection, out of order. There was a clear division. I'm not going to recognize the division, as it would just be a waste of time. Now they can appeal the decision of the chair. They have that opportunity to appeal the decision of the chair. But then the membership would vote and say, no, clearly 220 people said yes, there's no reason for division to waste time even further. Okay? Division, when called, what we would do is say, okay, maybe it was too close and I couldn't really tell, or it sounded like 100 people said yes and 104 people said no, and I'm just not sure. I could ask for division. That could be handled in a couple of different ways. It could be handled with raise your hands. It could be handled with, to the right side of the room, the ayes, to the left side of the room, the nays, and then we'll count heads. That can be handled by essentially separating those two and making a more clear indication of what would be a dividing of the vote. Okay? If you call a yay nay vote and it's close, can you call another vote using roll call? Yes, absolutely. If you're not certain as the chairperson and you're like, I just don't know, it's a big room, instead I'm going to request a roll call vote. The esteemed person from Estonia, yay, nay. The esteemed person from the Americas, yay, nay. And you could go around and do that. Or you could ask for division and a raising of the hands and then a request to essentially count the votes, visually. Good question. All right. The last thing that I'm going to cover, abstentions. Don't do it. If you are on a board of directors, you are there to vote. You are there to have your voice heard. There is, in my opinion, really only one place that you should be making an abstention or not voting, and that is if you have a authentic or legitimate conflict of interest. If there is something that is a conflict of interest, an abstention is not only appropriate, but also ethically obliged, okay? With that being said, just because it's a tough vote, just because somebody's feelings could be hurt by the vote, you as a leader or you as a member of a body, you are the authority. It is the expectation of a healthy organization that you can have disagreements and conflicts. Please see dealing with difficult people or difficult conversations trainings if that's not the case. But an abstention is bad form unless there is a conflict of interest. You should be making your vote. You should be making your voice heard. So that's all I'll say about that. I know that was heavy, right? Like we got in there deep. We did some good. I've got a couple of best practices for chairing, and I do want to make sure I'm trying to catch some of these questions. Neil is capturing them if I have missed any, and we will revisit those. So if you want to shake it out a little bit, move around, get something going here, we'll give you a couple of tips for chairing an effective meeting, and then some of my favorite, my 12-step program for having your meetings not suck. All right. All right, here we go. Leading effective meetings. During the meeting, call to order on time. I saw this question earlier, people being late. Well, if you have quorum, go without them. Obviously with quorum, that becomes a question. If you're not, I didn't obviously cover things of quorum. There's different meetings that require different levels of quorum. Check your bylaws, check your constitution, etc. But with that being said, if a meeting starts at 9 and you have quorum, start the meeting at 9. If you don't have quorum, I would very, very clearly indicate at the moment that quorum occurs, I'm going to use Neil just so I can pick on Neil. Neil, thank you. Now that you've arrived, we have reached quorum. We will be able to begin this meeting. That's not rude. That's factual. But I have made it very clear, Neil, we were waiting for you. And now that we are here with you, we are glad to start this meeting. But I might also handle that either preceding the meeting or after the meeting. Neil, I've noticed that there's been a pattern of you being late to the meetings. That's actually really slowing us down and not allowing our chapter, our board, our governing body to do business. Could I get a commitment from you to be on time so that way we can start the meetings effectively? And I would have a conversation about that. That would be a more direct, appropriate, but I'm not gonna lie, you walk in late to a comedy show and guess what? You are the star of the comedy show. And if you walk in late to my meeting and I've had to wait because you weren't there, I'm at least going to politely and professionally point out that the meeting can now begin, that Neil has entered the room. Start your meetings on time. If you're not bound by a quorum issue, start your meeting on time. And I have a very, very strict rule. I will not go back and catch you up to speed because you were late. I have an expectation that you will catch up or engage in a better way. All right. Stay focused using your agenda. Please stay focused using your agenda. Use that as your shield, your mighty shield, to continue going forward to ensure that you're staying on track. Encourage participation and do your best to equalize participation. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. Sometimes some people will take a little longer to, and I'm going to give you tactics to do this because me as an extrovert, very easy for me to speak up in a meeting. My colleague who's an introvert has flat out said, I find it challenging because I need to think through, or I need to do this, and I'm just not ready to do that. There are ways for you to have equalization inside of a meeting. I'm going to give you a couple tactics for that, but encourage that participation. Start by setting up the precedent. I'm expecting to hear everybody's opinion on this, as this is a matter that is incredibly important to our organization. Prompt comments when necessary, but do that with respect and dignity. All right, leading effective meetings. During the meeting, that was before. During the meeting, control and interruptions and digressions. If Captain America and Iron Man are getting out of control, it is your duty as leading that meeting to call that quits. I will thank you, Mr. Iron Man. Thank you, Captain America. We've heard both of your points. We'd like to hear from everybody else in the meeting at this point in time before we allow you to speak again. I'm just going to make it very clear, matter of fact, and professional. If they continue to do that, there are options, You can have your sergeant at arms take them out, although I don't know that I would want to fight Captain America, but you can have your sergeant at arms remove them, or you can call the meeting to recess until that is under control. You maintain control and be consistent in your rulings. Park digressions. I got a couple of tactics for this. If somebody starts to veer off, start talking about infinity zones, set that aside, table it, put it to the parking lot or whatever it is. Deflate windbags. If I am going to sit there and just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, limit the debate, limit the discussion, use the tools that you've been presented. Clarify and rephrase as the chair. What I'm hearing you say is you're ready to vote. What I'm hearing you say is we would like to entertain a motion to amend these bylaws. You can clarify and rephrase to encourage and promote the meeting to continue forward, even if you're not necessarily making motions yourself. Manage conflict. If it gets out of control, call a recess, get temperatures down, and then revisit or handle those on the side. In more formal procedures is probably a better choice when you have a larger group. This will help keep you on track. So being formal, the acknowledgements and everything else, probably a better when you have a group of 12 or more. Last but not least, we're going to do some sample topic areas. Actually, we're going to hold this off. It's a lot. What questions have I missed? I did see one from Dr. Jeremy. Let's say roll call is done and quorum established. One person is absent halfway during the meeting. The person comes to present their report, but no roll call was repeated till the end of the meeting. Does the one person consider as present or observer? Prerogative of the chair. I would call that the prerogative of the chair. If they're late, you can, at this point now, I would be reasonable with this, right? I would be reasonable with this, but roll call has been completed. If I have somebody that comes into my meeting and it's late, I would acknowledge their presence. Please let the minutes reflect that Neil has arrived at our meeting at 11:36 a.m. and let that be reflected in roll call. Now Neil's a part of the meeting. It's been noted in the minutes that Neil was an hour and 36 minutes late, but I can continue forward from there, especially if we do want to be considerate that even in the event that somebody is late or done something, that we want to make sure that voices are heard or that pieces of business have been done. Now, if Neil missed his line item, you have a choice. That could become old business. That could become dead. That could become something that you take on at the end of your meeting. Chair's prerogative. Good question.
Jay,
Other questions?
We have some questions that have just come directly to me. So what happens while we're waiting on Neil? Let's say we don't meet quorum. What happens then? And then I've got a follow-up.
Go ahead, fire away.
Okay, so can we call the meeting to order if we don't have quorum? Can we do reports? But my understanding is we can't do new business nor old business. Is that right? So what happens essentially if we don't have quorum? What can and we can't do?
Check your bylaws, check your constitution. I say that and I literally say, go back to there. Absolutely, you would not be able to conduct business. You would not be able to take votes, which also means if your bylaws indicate that you have to open the meeting with a vote, you're not having your meeting that day. If you have to set your agenda with a vote, you're not meeting that day because you can't set your agenda, which means that you don't have anything on the table. Check your bylaws, check your constitution. In the event that I didn't have quorum, what I would probably do is instruct, maybe committee meetings, discussion, open forum discussion. None of this will be recorded in minutes. None of this will be right. I would still try to make a value out of that, but business probably would not get conducted at that day.
Okay, this was actually somebody said great because their bylaws didn't cover this. So if your bylaws and constitution doesn't cover this, what's the general procedure using Robert's rules?
If the bylaws don't cover, I'm sorry, ask that question one more time.
So if you said to check for bylaws and constitution about what to do if you don't have quorum, but if your bylaws and constitution don't say anything, what's the best practice?
So I'm going to encourage you for two best practices. First of all, if your bylaws and your constitution don't address a critical issue, consider having that critical issue addressed in future bylaw and constitution discussions. Second, refer to something like Robert's Rules Online or the original Robert's Rules book. Believe it or not, they have essentially how best to manage virtually any situation that you can imagine in a meeting. This is an hour and a half long that we've done here today, and I've scratched the surface of what is possible inside of that space of Robert's Rules of Order. So consult the online Robert's Rules or your book for Robert's Rules. There's more than likely something that will help you cover. If you're not finding a resolution to your specific thing, two options: chair's prerogative, or have the membership vote to have the membership. I'd entertain a motion to take up this business, even though it's not listed in our bylaws, as a necessary function of tonight's meeting. Let me give you an example of this. In 2009, 2010, my local organization had a massive, massive crisis, one that made the entire board of directors resign from their positions, one that lost roughly about 30, we had 36 members, we went down to 4 literally overnight. So now we have 4 members left in our organization. There's no leadership. There's nobody to appoint. There's nobody to do anything. If I look at my bylaws, there is nothing in my bylaws or constitution to manage that situation. So we called a full meeting of the membership, which at that time was 4 people. We moved to suspend our bylaws in terms of elections. We did that. And then we elected us as leaders, so then we could take ownership of the chapter. Again, those are sort of egregious and high level. I oftentimes, well, can we just suspend bylaws or can we suspend rules to do this? Under the most egregious circumstances, yes. Don't use that as a default. That is not a default practice, and it defeats the purpose and the rules of protecting the minority, of making sure that majority rules in democracy, and to ensure that you have functional meetings, okay? So that would be how I'd answer that question.
Got a couple more. Do you want to take them now or in the pit?
Yeah, let's take them now. And I'll rapid fire my 12-step program at the end. So let's get those questions answered.
What's the difference between a motion to strike and a motion to rescind?
So a motion to strike is a motion that is an amendment. I move to strike the language of this motion. I move to strike the motion in general. I move to strike all the language of the motion, etc. A motion to rescind is the motion's already passed, and now we want to make it go away.
Could we clarify about what happens when we rescind a motion as well? You were talking about how with motions that the seconder of a motion doesn't have to actually vote for the motion. So there was a couple of people a little confused because they thought that meant that the seconder wasn't allowed to vote.
They are allowed to vote. So yeah, let me clarify. Good. Thank you for that question. If I make a motion, I move to adopt the Sokovia Accords, and Neil seconds that motion. Because I made the motion, I am forced to be in favor of the motion. If I'm no longer in favor of the motion, I would withdraw it. Neil seconded the motion. He has a choice to vote yay or nay. Who made the motion is required to vote yay. Who seconded the motion still has the choice to vote yes or no. Seconding a motion is what allows it to have debate and discussion. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily in support of the motion. I see one in the chat. If a person doesn't approve the agenda, can they attend the meeting? Yes, I can vote no on the agenda and say, no, I don't like this. Or I can vote no on the minutes or anything else as a member. So who gets to, and let me clarify this. This is actually a really, really good, I'm gonna lead this into something else. Your bylaws and your constitution should, and if they don't, talk to GLC Neil, should identify who your voting members are and should identify who has speaking rights inside of your meeting. Typically, and I will say this, so for example, in my local organization, only of age members in good standing have speaking rights and voting rights. If I'm the chair of my meeting and a senator comes in, I have the prerogative of saying, I would like to let the senator speak. And I also have the prerogative of saying, the senator is not an active of age member, is not a voting member of this organization, and therefore does not have speaking rights. Your bylaws should indicate who has speaking rights, who has voting rights. If it doesn't, address that. But with that being said, chair's prerogative, I can allow a non-member to speak. I can request a non-member to speak. If somebody's giving us a proposal, I could invite them up to give their proposal, even if they're not a member. And again, the membership controls the meeting, so they can always overrule the prerogative of the chair.
Got one about the chair, Jay, and then one about motions in general. So with the chair, there's been lots of questions over what a chair can and can't do. When should a chair vote? Are there any circumstances where a chair should actually vote?
Yes, I think that a chair should. Okay, well, and this is going to be the question, okay? If your chairperson is the president, and again, this is going to be something that you can decide for your local organization. I believe that the chair should probably vote. As an elected person, I have been elected by the membership to voice my opinion on matters of business that is being conducted. In my business, I vote, as the chair of my meeting, I vote on every item. My name is listed in the minutes for the direction and the choice that I made on every single item, whether I'm on the right side or whether I am on the nay side, okay? As a president of my local organization, I am a member, I am a of age person, and I have paid my dues. I have the right to vote, not just an obligation to vote as the local president, if I'm the local president or if I'm the national president. Now, do I have to? It's one of those things where if I am the chair and I'm calling for a vote, all of the ayes, please say aye. All the nays, please say nay. Okay, we're going to roll call, and it's a 50-50 vote. At that point in time, I'm generally obligated to vote in order to break the tie. How I conduct a roll call vote is in the first time that a roll call vote's called, we will say National President Treen, Madam Schmitz, Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Johnson, yes. And I will call myself and I will vote. The next time that I'm calling that roll call vote, I don't start with National President Treen. I'm going to start with Madam Schmitz, yes. Mr. Fitzgerald, yes. National President Treen, yes. Mr. Johnson, yes. The third time that I call for a roll call vote, Mr. Fitzgerald, yes. National President Treen, yes. Madam Schmitz, yes. Mr. Johnson, yes. I don't always start with the same person every single time. I would move one more into the order. So that way one person, whoever's the A in the alphabet doesn't necessarily always have the first vote in a roll call vote. That's something for you to consider as well.
Great. We've got a couple more, and then there's somebody who's been very keen and asked me this question, but I'm going to use it right at the end because I think it'll be a great segue to your recap of the 12 points on how to run an effective meeting. We've got a couple of questions about what happens if a motion doesn't have a seconder. Can it move forward?
Great question. The answer is no, it doesn't move forward. Now, this is pro-level chairpersonship, okay? It drives me insane when I see this. GLC Neil has made a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? Come on, guys. Is there no second? Like, is somebody going to second this? Karen, would you second this?
I second.
Thank you. That is not good chairpersonship. Okay. And now let me tell you, I just got a new puppy on January 1st. If I'm going to train the puppy to be a good puppy, I have to be consistent. If I'm sitting there begging for a second on every single one of my motions, my meetings are going out of control. If Neil makes the motion, is there a second? Is there a second? If there is no second, this motion will fail. The motion fails. That would be me being a very, 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 very generous chair. Because I generally is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Discussion continued. Or if there's no discussion because that's the original main motion, the next item of business is this. Well, wait a second, we didn't have a chance. It is your obligation as a member of this body to speak up, to allow your voice to be heard. A motion was made. We requested a second twice. There was no second, the motion fails. If you'd like to bring this up again, I would encourage you to do so in the next meeting, or I can make a chair prerogative to go back and say, I will allow for this item this one time to be discussed if there is a second. Neil, would you like to continue forward with your original motion? Neil says, yes. Is there a second? I guarantee you, people are gonna be like, second, yes, second. And then every time after that, I do not have any patience for it. Every time after that, is there a second to this motion? Is there a second to this motion? If I have to say it twice, the motion dies for lack of support. Next item of business. And I'm not going to have the second grace. If you consistently apply the rules and your members understand the rules and what those procedures are, that is what makes your meetings go faster. It may sound harsh, but I'm not being harsh. I'm being professional. I'm being direct, and I'm being considerate of the entire membership's time, energy, and efficiency inside of that meeting. That's how you have to think about it from the chairperson's perspective. If there's no second, next item of business, or the motion fails for lack of support, are there any other amendments or discussions? Thank you. And just shut it down.
Oh, okay. We've got 3 more questions, and then in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on so that you can talk about the 12 steps. And then if anyone's got any questions at the end, we can take them. And of course, you can always email me or Jay, and we will help get you the answers as well. So a couple of other ones that have come up are very quick ones. Can a board member move a motion?
I go back to the check your bylaws, check your constitution, right? Because there are instances in which case, yes, and there will be instances in which case, no. I tend to default to the idea that and it also depends on the type of meeting, right? So for example, I'll use a national conference. If the chairperson calls for a motion and a board person raises their hand in a general membership, in a general assembly, it's acknowledged. If it's a board of directors meeting, it may not be acknowledged. Ooh, interesting. A national vice president may have the ability to make a motion or to vote on a motion, whereas the auxiliary board member may not. Check your bylaws, check your constitution. They should define who has speaking rights and who has voting rights in your meeting. As a default, for me personally, and again, as a default, if they're on the board and they are a member of good standing and they are a member of the organization, they have a right to make motions inside of the meeting. If they have speaking rights, I look at it and say that they should probably have voting rights and the ability to move business. But again, check your bylaws, check your constitution.
If somebody voted no to the agenda, can they still attend the meeting and can they still vote on motions? So somebody said no to the agenda, can they still vote?
Yes. So if they said no to the agenda, now this is an interesting thing, right? Because I had mentioned to you, even like when you're stacking motions, I could vote yes to add Nebula to a committee and still vote down the committee when it gets back to the main motion. So just because I voted no on an agenda, just because I voted no on an agenda item or anything else, doesn't preclude me from having a voice in all other matters of the meeting. If I'm a member, I have a voice. If I'm a member of the majority or the minority, I have a voice. I can still make motions and I can still raise points of order, points of privilege, points of information, even if I wasn't on board for the agenda. And I want to bring something interesting here for you to think. In my opinion, and this is how I look at it, and this is how I expect my meetings to run. If we're in a very contentious issue and we're all a board of directors and we're split 51 to 49, okay? Half of the group doesn't agree, half of the group agrees. The way that I conduct my organizations, my meetings, is at the point in time when we have voted, and at the point in time that democracy has had the opportunity for the voices of aye and the voices of nay to be heard and recognized, and that vote is approved or disapproved, the entire body is now representing that decision made by the democracy. Let me repeat that again. You may not agree with it, but if it's approved, at that point in time, you have an obligation as a member of that body to support whatever that is, or to move forward with that as a part of the organization or the overseeing body, okay? If I am sitting there in a meeting with my business partners and my business partners, all 5 of them say yes, and I say no, what would happen if I just decided to go, well, fine, I'm not going to do this anyways, and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to be good for business. That is true inside of your local organizations, your national organizations, your state organizations. Once the voices have been heard, debate has been managed, and democracy and vote has taken place, at that point in time, it is a decision of the organization to go in a specific direction, follow and support that decision, or use the tools to rescind it later.
Great. We've got 2 that are linked to each other, and then we've got Karen's question that will nicely segue into
Sure.
your 12 steps. So the first part of this question is, people have heard sometimes that the chairperson will sometimes say a phrase like, seeing none, the motion is passed. So what happens if there's no debate, no one's made an amendment, no one's raising their hand, and it looks like this motion's just going to pass, and the chairman says, seeing none, the motion is passed? So when do people need to vote and raise their hand? And when can we also vote by acclamation? And what does voting by acclamation mean?
Sure. So if there is, let me give a couple of quick examples. If I'm the chair of a meeting and we're looking at the agenda, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Motion made by Diane, seconded by Gabriel. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Thank you. Motion passes. Next item of business. Okay, and I would do it literally probably that quickly. It's the agenda. If somebody wants to add something, It is the member's responsibility to speak up. It is the member's responsibility to speak up. In the event that we're evaluating the dissolution, getting rid of the extinction of our chapter. At that point in time, I may very intentionally and very inclusively, respectfully request that each member speaks before we go to vote. Context, environment. That might determine how much effort I make at requesting discussion. There's a motion on the table to dissolve our chapter. It has been supported. At this point, as the chair, I would request that each member speaks how they feel about this motion. I'll give you time if necessary in order to prepare your thoughts. We will take a 5-minute recess, and when we reconvene, I would like to hear from everyone. I've already set the standard, I've given you time, and I've set the expectation as the chair. If we go around and Nadia refuses to speak on the issue, I can't force Nadia to speak on the issue, but I've given her time, I've given encouragement, I've requested. As we go through each of the line, I can say, Nadia, do you wish to speak on this issue? And Nadia says, no, I don't wish to speak on this issue. I respect that, and I move to the next person. Votes by acclamation is when there's no alternative, generally, okay? Again, so a vote by acclamation is we have one candidate who is who's running for a position and there's no other candidates. I would move to vote by acclamation so we don't have to go through the roll call vote process. That's generally where you're going to use a vote by acclamation. If the vote by acclamation is yes, then it is still a vote of all in favor of GLC Neil, aye. All opposed, motion passes. Rather than having to waste the time of saying, national president from Estonia, Mr. Cataldo, Ms. Willis, Mr. Tong, and going through all of that. That is where the acclamation vote saves you time, energy, and efforts.
And then Karen's fantastic question. I think we've all been there as members, particularly if we've chaired the meeting. What do we do when members don't shut up? So we've had the motion, we think we finished the point, and you've got that one person that doesn't know when to quit. When can we throw them out of the meeting, and how do we manage disruptive people?
Well, that's a great question. You as the chair have that prerogative. You can throw them out of the meeting the first time that they do it. Now, the membership can overrule you. The membership could request that somebody is point of order. The language that is being used at this point in time, I believe, is offensive, and I would like to request that this person's removed from this hearing or from this meeting. Okay? As a chair, I have a choice. I can say, and again, I'm using Neil just because it's a sensitive subject. Mr. Fitzgerald, there's been a question about your language inside of this meeting. I would ask you to please preclude from using the term Jay Johnson is a jerk any further. And if you do, you will be asked to leave this meeting. Now, if Neil does speak up again, I might throw him out. Or the membership could essentially appeal the decision of the chair. No, Jay, we don't want him to ever say Jay Johnson's a jerk again. And we appeal your decision to give him a second chance. And we're going to vote that he leaves the meeting. Your members own the meeting. And I know that this sounds really aggressive, but I mean, at the point in time that you have somebody that's so disruptive, I will oftentimes at this point in time, I have asked GLC Neil to leave this meeting, and that has not been conducted. What I would request at this point is a 15-minute recess. We will take that now. We break away, and I'm going to start looking at what my constitution, what my bylaws allow for disciplinary action. Am I allowed to remove Neil's membership? Maybe. Am I allowed to, extradite or whatever? Maybe. Am I allowed to fine him? Maybe. That's going to be determined by my bylaws and my constitution. In the event that he's disruptive, aggressive, or anything else, guess what? I have seen it happen more than one time where law enforcement, like legit law enforcement, has been called to a board of directors meetings because two members could not get their civil discourse under control. Escalate as appropriate. Don't go with the nuclear option right away, but escalate as appropriate. Take a recess if necessary. Take a step back. Sometimes during a recess, it might be, Neil, I'm not sure that you're aware of what impact you're having on the 200 people that are sitting around you, but this is becoming very disruptive and they're very not happy with this. How would you like to go forward? Would you be willing to sit and be quiet for the rest of this meeting? Or is this something that I'm going to have to excuse you? I refuse to leave. Neil, if you refuse to leave, I'll be forced to take action inside of the meeting to have your membership removed, and you will no longer have speaking rights or membership rights. I don't care. I'm really angry. If you don't leave the meeting, we're going to have to call the authorities and have you removed. It happens. It happens in government. It happens in business. It happens in nonprofits. So again, try to handle it with civility. Try to handle it with grace and style. Try to handle it using the tools like a recess or, the motions or the points of order. But in the end, make sure you're firm and you're consistent and you're fair.
Okay, and then we've got one bonus one, and then we will wrap up and hand back over to you to go through the 12 steps.
Sure.
So we all know that as members, when we get to our next meeting, we vote on the minutes of the previous meeting. What should be in the minutes? And second, as a follow-up, what do we do when we have to talk about something confidential? We don't necessarily want it on the minutes. Can we use this thing called executive session? And what is it and how does it work?
Good questions. So in the minutes, you can do them in two different ways, and I've seen them done in two different ways. I've seen them where literally it's almost transcription, where somebody is typing what each person says. Neil said this, Annette said this, Ashley said this, Simeon said this, Natasha said this. And there's literally a transcript of everybody's discussion, or at least kind of major points of it. I've also seen it where it's the agenda with each of the business items, where it says, motion was made by Diane. It was seconded by Florence. The ayes had it. If it was a roll call vote, it might list out every person's roll call vote. You can do that in either way. It's really what's being accepted by your membership. It's what's being accepted by your board, and it's what your best practices are that you set as the expectation of the chairperson. In terms of something like executive session, this concept of executive session, that is designed to handle very sensitive issues. So for example, in township government, we used executive session when we were discussing things like lawsuits. You can't really have those out in the open. You can't be having the discussions about those out in the open or having those reflected in the minutes. Executive session requires a vote to move into executive session. When you move into executive session, only voting members may remain unless the chair and the voting members encourage. So say, for example, Natasha, my dear friend, has something to tell us that's really, really important as a board, and it's very sensitive information. I might entertain a motion to move into executive session. Motion's been made by Mr. Cataldo. It has been supported by Martina. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. We will move into executive session. I would like to invite anybody that is not a board of director to please vacate this meeting. We will bring you back in when executive session concludes. I would like to also invite Natasha, as she is sharing the sensitive information, to participate in this executive session, even though she is not a board member, without, with no essentially objections from the board. Hearing none, thank you, Natasha, please stay, everybody else out. We conduct our executive session. No meeting notes are taken during that executive session, and a vote is made to come out of executive session. I think we've heard from Natasha effectively. I think we know which direction we need to go as a board of directors. I would entertain a motion to exit executive session. Motion made by Christina. It's been supported by Richard. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We move out of executive session. If in executive session, we were talking about Neil's bad behavior and having to remove Neil from the organization, we can't take that vote inside of executive session. We can have the discussion, but the vote still has to be on the record, even if that's uncomfortable. Based on discussions from executive session, I would entertain a motion to remove Neil's membership. Motion's been made by Melissa. It's been seconded by Gabriella. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed say nay. The motion fails for support. Neil, you get to retain your membership. So with that being said, you don't take votes inside of executive session. You can have discussion, you can have agreement, but you still have to take your votes with transparency in the world of the real world. Okay? Great questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. Jay, if you could run through the 12 steps, and then if we've got time at the end, we'll see if we've got any more. And if not, you can always email us and we will get you some answers too.
Absolutely. And Neil's a great resource to tap into. So I'll be very quick on this. 12 steps to get you to effective meetings. First step, does this need to be a meeting? Stop having meetings that should be an email. Does it need to be a meeting? Do you need everybody that's in there to be in that meeting? This is above and beyond questions of Robert's rules. Second, the Bezos approach, making sure that everybody's on the same page. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, what he does is the first 20 minutes of the meeting is the people that are in the meeting reviewing the documents that they're going to discuss. Why? Because he understands human behavior. And if I give you the documents in advance, you're probably not going to read them until the meeting anyways. So let's take 20 minutes, all get on the same page, and then have our discussion. But make sure your team's on the same page. Third, time is of the essence. And what I mean by that is don't schedule your meeting for Friday at 4 p.m. and expect people to still be engaged. Generally, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 2 p.m. is one of the best documented times for meetings. Next, manage the environment. Make sure that it's not too cold, make sure that it's not noisy, that it's not full of distractions, and that your people have the opportunity to be comfortable inside of that meeting space. Next, assign roles. Give people responsibilities or jobs to do, whether that's timekeeping, whether that's writing things on the board, whether that's keeping track of how many times somebody says in the meeting. You can have some fun with this. This doesn't have to be all boring and anything else, but make sure that people have jobs or assigned roles inside of the meeting. That will help to keep engagement. The 10-minute rule by John Medina, who's an evolutionary psychologist as well as neuroscientist. And he says you got about 10 minutes of actual attention inside of a meeting, and you have about 30 seconds to earn it. And if you're not checking in with your attendees every 10 minutes or so, probably going to lose them. Encourage written notes. There is statistical significance in studies that show that people remember more, are more active and engaged, and they're more participatory when written notes are actually utilized. And it is written, not necessarily typed, just FYI. So that's founded in the science. Writing down questions. This is one way to help make your meetings inclusive. Some people may not be comfortable speaking up. Some people may not necessarily have the ability to just jump in and ask the questions that they need to ask. Give people, I'm going to give a few moments here for you to consider your questions, to write them down, and then we'll collect the questions and react to them as a group. This gives people the ability to have their voices heard, to think through it, and to also make sure that it's a group facilitation. I love jigsaw meetings. I will divide up my team You three, you're going to take on this issue. You three, you're going to take on that issue. You three, you're going to take on that issue. We'll bring it back in 15 minutes. And I want you to come up with at least 3 potential solutions that we can consider as a group. Ready, set, go. I've just broken it up to essentially ad hoc committees and broken up that meeting. Now people have 3 people in a group. It's very difficult to hide. It's very difficult to not be engaged or participate. And there's an expectation at the end that they have to bring some value back to the full group, of which we can then determine what's the best course of action or a different one. Swapping chairpersons. Sometimes I'm not the right person to lead a meeting. Sometimes I am. If you want the hatchet, if you want quick, direct, probably the right person. If it is going to be something that is not along that line, maybe I'm not the right person. This is something that you have an option for as the chairperson. I would like to appoint Kyle as the chairperson for this meeting. Kyle and I had a discussion and we really felt that Kyle's position and objectiveness in this case would be a great value. I would entertain a motion to adopt Kyle as our chairperson for this meeting. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Florence. All in favor. Kyle's the chairperson. Don't be afraid to swap a chairperson. That's okay. You can do that. End with clear action items. Don't have a meeting for meeting's sake. What are the action items at the end of it? Who's responsible for what, by when, and how? And then send it out. Send out the summary, send out the minutes. A lot of times, no one sees the minutes until the next meeting when they're like, here's the minutes, go ahead and approve them. Send out the summary, send out what the exciting things that people missed, the value propositions that occurred, get that out quickly and efficiently after the meeting. That is a 12-step program and tactics for you to have very successful meetings. I want to say thank you so much for spending the time with us.